Good afternoon, everyone, and a Ramadan Kareem to you all. Thank you very much for joining today's webinar. My name is Lindsay, and I'm the Education Officer at Emirates Green Building Council. I'm very pleased to welcome you all today to this webinar on air quality in the Emirates as part of a wider series of webinars by World Green Building Council on air quality in the built environment to celebrate 50 years of Earth Day. So before we begin, I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction to Emirates Green Building Council and our activities for those of you who might not be as familiar with us. So Emirates Green Building Council is a not-for-profit membership-driven organisation that was established to contribute to the UAE's goal of being a leader in sustainability in the built environment. We bring together organisations who share our mission, and we provide a platform for collaboration and knowledge sharing to build capacity towards sustainability in the UAE. Our community continues to grow and strengthen within the UAE as more and more organisations commit to sustainability. Our focus covers a variety of different topic areas in the built environment, including but not limited to energy and water efficiency, net zero buildings, green hospitality, green schools, and health and well-being. It's the health and wellbeing topic that we are very proud to be working with the World Green Building Council on. We're one of the GBCs to sit on the steering committee for the Global Better Places for People programme and are actively participating in the air monitoring Plant the Sensor campaign, which Katrina will give more detail on shortly during this webinar. We've been exploring the topic of air quality in the Emirates through the school environment with in-person roundtable discussions with industry experts, and have recently started working on a monitoring project with Emirates Green Building Council member Saint-Gobain, which our guest Nada Chami will discuss in her presentation. So air quality has a huge impact on the health and wellness of building occupants and is particularly relevant here in the UAE, where our climate keeps people indoors for a good part of the year. Also in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, this is a topic that is becoming increasingly important. So we're very pleased to bring together expert speakers today to discuss and raise awareness on this topic. We hope it will start and continue the conversation on this topic, and that we can bring our community together to discuss how to improve air quality in buildings in the UAE and the wider region. So let me run through the agenda for today's webinar and also introduce you to our expert speakers. So the session will open with a presentation by Katrina Brady, who is the head of the Better Places for People global project at World GBC. With a background in environment and sustainability consultancy and experience in implementing green and healthy building certifications worldwide, Katrina manages a steering committee of approximately 30 GBCs to deliver the deliverables of the project. So we then have two guest speakers who are both valued Emirates Green Building Council board members and experts in their field to present. Our first presenter is Markus-Erich, who is the Senior Executive Vice President of Regional Solutions and Services of Smart Services at Siemens Middle East. Markus supports customers in the region to build digitalized infrastructure for smarter, safer, and more energy efficient buildings. Our second speaker will be Nada Chami, who is the Business Development Manager at Saint-Gobain. She's a sustainable construction specialist and has worked on delivering sustainable construction solutions adapted to the region and the local regulations here. Our webinar is going to conclude with a 2 seconds. Let me just share my screen again. Apologies for this. So our webinar will conclude with a panel discussion, which will be led by Katrina. We encourage you all to submit questions during the panel discussion, which we will try and answer as many as possible during that discussion. So a couple of quick practical points before we get started. Your microphones are muted, so the best way to submit the questions is through the questions box on your control panel. We will share a link to the recording of the webinar afterwards. And please do join the conversation and follow and post using the EGBC webinar hashtag. And you can also link to the EmirateGBC profile. So finally, if you do have any other questions about Emirates Green Building Council, or you want to get in touch about membership, then please do use the email address on the screen now, and we look forward to hearing from you. So I will now hand over to Katrina to begin our first presentation of the session.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for firstly an introduction to myself and to what we're going to talk about today, and to Emirates Green Building Council for being able to collaborate with us in this session. So it's my pleasure, well, this morning here in Scotland, I know it's around early afternoon for many of you in the Emirates, to kick off with a discussion about air quality in the built environment and what we're doing at the World Green Building Council level and in partnership with many of our GBCs. Let's see if this slide wants to move. There we go. So my name is Katrina Brady. As Lindsay kindly introduced, I'm head of the Better Places for People Global Project at the World Green Building Council. So the World Green Building Council is a global network which brings together the 70 national green building councils who are operating in national markets and working on transformation on the ground. Our global green building movement brings together action to accelerate the ambition of the Paris Agreement and the UN SDGs, and our mission is that we're committed to green buildings for everyone, everywhere. Now, in terms of the strategy of the World Green Building Council, I mentioned the UN SDGs, and hopefully if this is going to jump forwards for me, I can show you which ones specifically I'm talking about. There we go. You'll see at the bottom of this slide, there are 11 of the Sustainable Development Goals that we at the World GBC have identified are the ones that we believe our network can directly impact. Now, I won't go through all 11, that would take up lots of this presentation, but what you can see is that these boil down into 3 broad thematic areas, and those are the backbone of the World Green Building Council strategy for the next 3 years. Climate action, health and well-being, and resources and circularity. And as Lindsay mentioned, it's the health and well-being area that we're focusing on in this session, and is also my area of specialism at World GBC. Now, the health and well-being work is held under this global project, Better Places for People. As Lindsay mentioned, our steering committee has 30 green building councils on it. Emirates GBC are very heavily involved, as Lindsay mentioned, and our campaign works to reduce the contribution from the built environment to human health issues, helping to enhance sustainability, looking both at individual health crises like air pollution, but also health and well-being more holistically. Now, for the purpose of this session, our topic is, of course, air quality, so I'm going to show you just now some of the work that we're doing in that area. Now, to kick off with a few stats about air pollution on a global perspective, I always like to start with this statistic about the fact that 91% of the global population live in locations around the world that exceed the limits set by the World Health Organization for healthy exposure to pollutants. So really, air pollution wherever we are in the world is a problem for everybody, but I know from conversations with many of you in the region, and particularly in the Emirates, that there are urban areas where it really is a substantial problem, and at least it is growing in attention. Globally, we know that the death toll that can be attributed to air quality is huge, looking at around 7 million early deaths each year, coming both from the ambient outdoor pollution and also from indoor sources. But then on the other side of the sustainability coin, we have the environmental impact, and short-lived climate pollutants, which encompass many of the pollutants that we're aware of, like greenhouse gases, black carbon, are attributed to have caused 45% of warming to date, according to research that's been published by the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. So I don't think I need to persuade you anymore that, of course, air quality is an important topic to focus on, but from the perspective of the steering committee of the Better Places for People project, what we realised at the end of 2018 was that there is understandably great attention to the transport industry, to agriculture, waste, to many of these sectors which are well known to produce air quality issues, but that we felt the contribution of the built environment was perhaps underrepresented and is of course an area that we spend 90% of our time, as we'll hear more from our two panelists in a second. So last year we kicked off a dedicated campaign about air quality in the built environment. You'll recognise that title, it's the title of this series of webinars, and we partnered with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, who are a UN subset, to be able to support the work of them and the World Health Organization. And our mission is to promote a sustainable built environment to mitigate both the cause and the effects of air pollution for people and planet. And I'll just dig into this a little more to illustrate really what we're talking about here. In terms of the campaign, we have 4 specific goals. The first is to reduce ambient outdoor emissions that are attributed or caused by the built environment. So that can be buildings in operation, it could be the embodied emissions, it could be construction. But we're looking at outdoor, and then secondly, we're also looking at indoor. We want to mitigate those sources of indoor air pollution as far as possible, which we will dig further into in this conversation, I'm sure. Thirdly, we want to promote sustainable building operation, because we're very aware of the potential tension and conflict you can create between energy efficiency and health and well-being, particularly when ventilation is one of the key topics. We want to ensure we're not creating an emissions multiplier effect. And fourthly, we want to increase awareness and action. So this is a thought leadership campaign, but we also want to drive change, both in terms of citizen and private sector behaviour, but also in terms of policy. So to illustrate a few of these specific sources, just to fully talk through this introduction, I mentioned ambient air pollution, this outdoor air pollution, and I did mention some other factors that we must be very aware of, but we do want to be certain that we're fully emphasising the role that the building and construction industry can have in causing these pollutions. There's a range of different causes, hopefully on your screen, ranging from energy. We know that 39% of global energy-related carbon emissions are attributed to buildings, both operationally and in the embodied emissions of them. Construction, we know that there are, unfortunately, pollutants being emitted at all stages of the supply chain, for example, from the creation of bricks through to the pollution being created on site. And then, of course, we like to thermally control our buildings, don't we? We like them to be comfortable. Here in Scotland, we are focused very much on heating, but I assume that most of you in the UAE are talking more from the cooling perspective. But particularly in the developing world, we know that heating in old-fashioned cook stoves, where we have combustion happening within people's homes, are a huge cause of black carbon emissions. And cooling as well, where we have emissions of HFCs found in air conditioning systems, are another potent climate forcer. And then on the other side of the coin, we have this indoor air pollution. Again, we have the heating. We know that when we're combusting these solid fuels within our houses, that's creating this indoor air pollution and can go between the indoor and outdoor environment. Then more specifically indoors, damp and mold can be caused by air infiltration, can be caused by inefficient building fabric, and that can create these airborne microbes, which are very damaging to our health, particularly if you're somebody that suffers already from respiratory problems. Same with chemicals. I'm sure we'll talk more about VOCs, volatile organic compounds, that can be emitted or off-gassed from certain materials that many of us have in our homes, schools, offices. Same with toxic materials that we're growing in awareness of, but they still remain exposed and in the active material cycle. And then interestingly, I think outdoor infiltration and infiltration from outdoor pollutants into our homes or buildings is a really interesting topic of conversation. And studies have shown that actually most of our exposure to outdoor pollutants occur when we're inside. So there really isn't this clear-cut divide between outdoor and indoor. We do sometimes have to look at them a bit more holistically. Now, I touched on these problems, but I want to really emphasize the fact that when we're talking about the impacts of air pollution, we want to look at it from 3 different lenses. In terms of people, air pollution is the largest environmental killer in the world. So bigger than, the death toll is larger than from unclean water. And that is something that, as we increase awareness of, really we do have the power to hopefully try and reduce that. In terms of planet, we know the emissions related to these pollutants have a huge impact on the enhanced greenhouse effect. That's something that, again, we want to cut down for health and for environmental reasons. And in terms of our buildings, we will look at construction, we'll look at operation, we're going to look at the life cycle. There are ways that we can create and construct and deconstruct and operate our buildings that will be healthier for people and cut down on those planetary emissions too. So in the last couple of minutes of my introduction, I'd like to share with you what we're doing on the call to action side. And Lindsay did mention this briefly in her introduction, so thank you. And you may have heard of it already, but the background is that we recognise with air quality that the biggest challenge really is that it's partially invisible, particularly when we're looking inside buildings. Generally, we are not aware of the levels of pollutants, particularly these chemical pollutants that are inside our buildings or offices or schools. And if we cannot measure it, then it's very, very difficult to improve it. So one of the realizations that we've had is that if we're going to tackle the contribution of the built environment, we have to be able to measure it, and we need data to be empowering those decisions that we want people to be making in their personal lives, in their organizations, and to transform government policy eventually. So as a result, at the end of last year, the World GBC and the steering committee of GBCs around the world launched a dedicated air quality monitoring campaign called Plant a Sensor. We did this alongside a number of our partners. You'll see at the bottom. It's wonderful to be joined today by representatives from both Saint-Gobain and Siemens. Nada and Markus are both familiar with the campaign, and hopefully we can illustrate a little bit more how we're all collaborating on this. And in terms of the campaign that we're doing, the purpose of it is that firstly, we want access to real-time, reliable quality data that will enlighten the citizens who participate in it about air quality around them. It's a monitoring campaign where we're installing sensors both indoors and outdoors in buildings. So it can give us this range of data and look at the relationship between these 2 environments. As I said, we want the data to be reliable, we want it to be verified. There is a methodology to participation in the campaign that has been quite rigorously looked through and is aligned to our partners at Reset, to our experts in this space. And so we want the data that's created to be valuable for researchers and policymakers to enhance national regulations. This will also empower a global audience for advocacy conversations and ultimately help us to fulfill our goal for this space, which is to ensure the impact of the built environment can be recognised and targeted. So how does it work, in case you're interested? So what we are looking for around the world are participants. So anybody can be a participant. You can be a participant in your home, in your school, office. You can plant one on the street. And we are looking for these participants to plant sensors and to, following the methodology, to monitor and report the data that comes out of them. This data is publicly available and accessible through the campaign platform, which is called Reset Earth. From our side, we'll be analysing that data and working with the GBCs to make use of it. And the data is also being contributed to a wider citizen science campaign called Earth Challenge 2020, which is being run by the Earth Day Network and a series of other partners as part of the celebration efforts of 50 years of the Earth Day movement. So this is what the site looks like. You can check it out now on resetearth.com. You'll see the Plant a Sensor banner at the top and know you've come to the right place. And you can see already around the world there are pilot projects being installed left, right and centre. You can see in the MENA region we certainly need more, but of course the current situation with the pandemic and with lockdown has made it very difficult for us to be able to install sensors everywhere that we can or do want to. So this is a campaign that is of incredible importance in terms of the global repercussions for climate change, but as we will talk about more today, the fact that we're all spending so much time inside our buildings and realistically may do so for the foreseeable future, I think really brings home the importance of us knowing the indoor environmental quality and being able to control it for the good of our health. So if you'd like to find out more about this campaign, I'll drop this link in the chat box, but worldgbc.org/plant-a-sensor or EmirateGBC are very much involved, so you can work directly with them directly through them to be part of this campaign. And I will wrap up there. I won't take questions just now because we're going to have questions later on in this session, but it's a pleasure for me to be able to hand over to Markus. And thank you very much for now.
Thank you very much. Fiona, this was a very good presentation, and I'm really in support of Plant-a-Sensor. I'll show you, if you give me control on the next page, what is a city performance tool and why do we need that? Because the first thing is we need to connect our sensors, right? And once we know and we have enough data, like you said, you will analyze. I think I still don't have control on my mouse. Yeah. Oh, it went too far. Yeah. Good. Connect, collect, analyze, and act. That's what we say to everything where we want to be in control. Currently, we have rudimentary data of air quality, pollutants, and rudimentary, I mean, look, 20, 50 sensor in a country, in a city is nothing, because the amount of data does not allow you to do a tracing of the source of the pollutant and getting into a mode after analyzing to define actions. And what we want to achieve is through the participation in Plant-a-Sensor campaigns and adding sensors in the thousands and maybe millions around the world, we will get an accurate view on the performance and the air quality in the city. And it helps the city planners basically to define or to design future cities in a much better way, but also the city managers to manage the sources in a much better way. So it really comes down to all of us and the companies chipping in money, and indoors it's a personal decision, outdoors it can be the government and companies and corporates to make a landscape possible in the city management tool where we can see, does pollution come from transportation, from buildings, from construction, from energy sources that we currently have switched on, or from industries. And the finer the grid of sensors will become, the more accurate our countermeasures can be. And I'll come to that later, but I mean, health and safety has achieved that everyone knows what a zero harm policy is in any construction site. We utterly take care on health during construction. HSE officers have enormous power. But currently, does a HSE officer look at the wind direction, at earthwork, if a dump truck is dumping dust and fine dust, while it most likely will invade the city and cause harmful diseases and asthma attacks for us as inhabitants, right? This is not in the protocol, but it will get into the protocol once we have more analysis and define the counteractions for such pollution. And the Plant-a-Sensor campaign, I believe, every construction site, every factory site, every power generation and transportation and station of metro, tram, or anything else must be equipped to, over time, learn and define our reaction model. So in the city performance tool, for example, I just give you, I mean, everyone and also the Emirates have targets, and that's nice, but are we just in the hand of fate? Are we just looking at our 24 hours past averages and say it was a really good year last year, or it was a good day yesterday? we actually are able to define the future by the right action. And one action, of course, all of us could drive e-cars or hydrogen cars. But the important part is that we better manage and monitor the KPIs, that which measures are possible. Is it possible to switch from fossil fuel to solar at a certain wind direction? Yes, it is possible. Is it currently protocol? No, it is not protocol. Do we, in the street between, in the Sheikh Zayed Road and E11 between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, do we look at wind direction and congestion and influence the toll system? No, we don't. But these are all levers and measures that we have in our hand to control the inflow of pollutants into the city. We are not only in the hand of fate. We can roll out a future smart city by having more data, analyze the data, and better understand what can cause this citywide pollution. It's not just happening. I believe, like it was mentioned before, construction work, also wind direction, all of these factors need to be considered in deciding if work has to continue or has to be shifted to tomorrow, or if generation has to be migrated to a different source, because the wind and the NO2 pollution for the city is just wrong due to the wind direction, right? So these are all actions that currently we might know a bit, but we are not acting on it because we don't have a city performance tool and enough data to allow us to have actionable insights. So much said to the initiative before, which I greatly support. So what do we, for example, monitor? Which KPIs would we monitor? And we have a few cities around the world which already have started. Of course, all the air quality KPIs that was before mentioned by Catriona, and greenhouse gases. But we also have to look at the impact on the economy. There's a whole new dimension of jobs related to such things. I mean, we have the police to look after crimes, but who is searching and investigating pollution crimes? Who is looking after the dump truck that just dusted a whole suburb because the wind direction was into that suburb where you and me live, right? We do not investigate. We do not even report. We don't have a correlation between action and reaction. So that's what we try to mitigate through a city performance platform, a tool, which is also accredited by several institutes. It's the right direction to go. And why do we want a few projects? I also show you here around the world, some completed, some initiated, but it's far too few. And we also need to bring that to the Middle East. I know we have databases and historic data, but where we want to come to is to more or less predict the future. So here you see, you can go through the slides in detail. I have only 10 to 15 minutes maximum, sorry. Which transportation, for example, is less impactful on CO2 and what is the cost versus benefit bridge. But we need to define much more. It's not only transportation. I believe it is, let me come to that. Yeah. Okay, yeah, here we go. So on the city air management, we need to enlighten the companies and the citizen. And I emphasize companies again, because it's not only us who are in the wrong vehicle, who are not using the tram and the metro. It's also the decisions of companies, which trucks they use, what fuel they are using. Do they use hydrogen? Do they use electric trucks? What are the options they have? Because most of the traffic is not in our hand, right? So we need to create more of a campaign, and we need to reduce the dangerous air days. And that's again not fate. These are smart decisions. So when we see correlation, weather, pressure, wind, and generation options, we can also switch to different primary power sources, primary energy sources. And that will reduce the bad air days in a managed way and not by fate. So us as individuals, of course, we have the choice of our own transportation. And we need to socialize to all stakeholders, and that's government, that's companies, and that's individuals, that their own action counts. And once we use artificial intelligence on top of the historic data, the forecasting data, and certain simulations, we will be pretty accurate in forecasting. Let me also jump over that slide. In forecasting what's going to happen, and this is where I wanted to get to. It's not only in retrospect and post-mortem, we look back at the last 24 hours and we are either proud or upset about the KPIs that we have published. We need to come to a model where technology is really helping us to predict the future and the forecast of air quality over the next 5 days or more. And that only works by really integrating multiple sources of data into neural networks. And I believe technology is available. What is not available is the data and the cause and effect reporting. The thing is not only that we report crimes, we have to report certain events that we see. Citizens and stakeholders need to be rewarded for avoiding events that can feed a neural network and sharpen our predictive models. It's not only that the data will tell us everything, we also need to correlate it to observations. So it will still require a complete different data supply, because it is the perception of people that needs to also feed into the artificial neural network. And only sensors doesn't do the trick. We need to correlate and come to a very accurate forecasting model. And that's not only the purpose, the mitigation model is the purpose. So how can the, let's say, 1 million observed events plus the data bottom up from sensors allow us to define actions, stop certain activities in the city under certain conditions that will lower the average of pollutants in the air. Good. I think we go over that. These are all countermeasures you have heard and seen many times. For example, in the city air management that is online in Nuremberg, lots and loads of sensors are there, but here there is one little yellow shading, and it has a NO2 alarm, and there are a few still green shaded, but again exceeding some NO2 minus thresholds or down PM10 and PM2.5. If we would have that around the suburbs or where we live, is it in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Fujairah, or in Ras Al Khaimah, or there, the thing is that will then allow to map observations to it and accurate cause and effect analysis. And these platforms exist. I highly encourage also maybe Smart Dubai will roll further out. And the target is not to predict or to report the past. The target is to influence the future of pollution and run through models that allow us to manage it. Yeah? So by dashboards, by displaying, and by having grip on actions, we will be able to shape the air quality outdoors. Now coming to indoor solutions, we are in a time of a viral attack of unseen proportions, and there are attempts to reduce the, not to reduce the outside air in building HVAC system, but only run on outside air, which could also have a detrimental effect. So I'm not the apostle of that. We have also to reduce the VOCs in the buildings, but and now it comes bacteria, pathogens, viruses, and of course also mold. And simple air change doesn't do the trick anymore. We need to have active components, and the solution that I am proposing is a ionization technology that basically either if we have fine dust, it pulls up the dust through positive and negative ions. So we make the particles larger, easier to capture, falling down in the ducts or in filters, or it will also disable pathogens, viruses and bacteria over time. Details on technology can be provided. The important thing is all of us will earlier or later go back to offices, and we have an awkward feeling. And such a solution can be retrofitted into existing HVAC systems right? You can either have it mounted on coils, you can have it mounted on ducts. Inside the ducts, it can be inserted, or it can be fan mounted, and very low energy consumption, very easy to install. And results show that this is really an effective countermeasure to the worries and feelings that we all have. There are also units that are portable. Let me not, this has nothing to do now. Siemens, I show you also other technologies. We have the sensors, we have the measuring devices, but currently, as we speak, I would say in our buildings, this is not integrated. I am proposing this technology based on this matrix because either, for example, purely an air filter doesn't help us to kill the pathogens. It cannot be installed as easy as the technology I mentioned before. It has many gaps. And ultraviolet rays are also having lots of gaps. And ionization, in my opinion, is very quickly to be deployed, and it will integrate into the building management system. We have a very good grip, and to the occupants of the buildings, the office worker, us, on our office booking platforms. Yeah, for example, we use Comfy, where we book our desks and where we are announcing that we are going to office and where we are monitoring that the governmental thresholds of less than 25 and 30% of occupants are only in the building. Such an app on your phone can also update you about the performance of the air purification system in your building. And that will give the returning office workers a real good feeling. And of course, it will also influence their performance and their productivity. Later, when you look through the slides, you can see how these measures are complying to ASHRAE standards. And I think I'm almost through. One case study I like to mention, I mean, this is lots and loads over you must have seen similar cases where in a daycare center, they were complaining about sicknesses and cough rotating from child to child. Once such a purification system was integrated or built into the HVAC system, the infestation and rolling over of sicknesses has reduced drastically. And it was after a final post installation test verified by an independent authority that the readings of pathogens and all other VOCs has reached a neglectable level. So since it is not installed, and we all know that this is not in commercial buildings nowadays, apart from knowing data, having data, plant a sensor, which is absolutely necessary, I'm also appealing to countermeasures. And countermeasures are as above, a citywide system, and in any kind of HVAC system, post-mortem, post-installation, a retrofitting of actionable things. And that would be a purification system. And with all of that, okay, if you have questions later on, we will discuss in our forum. And I think also you have email addresses of ours. You can contact us if you have such needs, want to have any further detail on technology, please don't hesitate. Thank you.
So thank you, Marcus. I think maybe we lost Katrina, but I'll start with my presentation. So good morning and good afternoon to everyone connected. I hope you are doing good, adapting well to the current situation and keeping yourself motivated. So indoor air quality is a topical subject at this moment, and I'm happy to be part of this educational webinar series that World Green Building Council is leading to create awareness around the subject. Next, please. So as you all know, the built environment has a huge impact on the planet, as Katrina mentioned. But not only that, in fact, the built environment has also a huge impact on people's health and well-being, since we spend more than 90% of our time indoor, up to 95% in UAE to escape the harsh climate. and even 100% during these times, as I'm sure many of you can relate. Next, please. So a quick introduction about Saint-Gobain. We have been in the construction business for more than 350 years. The key to the growth is the innovative approach and the sustainable young mindset. Our main objective is to help the construction industry, key stakeholders, to create healthy and comfortable indoor environments by designing and manufacturing the right building solution. And this is the definition of the multi-comfort design approach, which starts from the end user's perspective. So depending on the function and location of the building, and with the help of our building science team, we have created a set of criteria that needs to be fulfilled to satisfy the four sensorial comforts, so the feel, the see, the breathe, and the hear. But also to fulfill the low energy demand, the low carbon footprint, the life cycle assessment, and other requirements and regulation that our solution impact both directly and indirectly. So following this approach, we started to get involved in different projects all around the world. The idea is to have ordinary buildings reach optimum comfort and performance level in a sustainable and cost-efficient way. So you can find all of our 30 projects on our website, multicomfort.com. So our focus today will be one of the most important key parameters, the indoor air quality. We cannot live without air, but also it's the most difficult parameter to feel and to assess without measurements. It's very easy to say it's loud or hot in here, but it's difficult to say this place has bad indoor air quality unless it's really smelly and stuffy. Next, please. So in terms of outdoor pollutant, and I think Katrina and Marcus has covered most of them, but some sources, of course, are naturally occurring, such as particulate matter. Next, please. So particulate matter, and others are produced by the transportation sector, the construction site, the energy generation, and in UAE in particular, next please, we can see that the particulate matter concentration due to the sandstorm and dust are very high, and we have also higher level of ozone due to the construction pace in the region and also the continuous use of the cooling system, the HVAC everywhere. Next please. So in terms of indoor pollutants, we can have different nature and origin. We have three main different types. So the particulates, which could be dust, dander coming from animal and pollen. We have also microbials, so living organism, bacteria, viruses, and mold. And we have gases, so mainly the chemical pollutant. Next, please. So known as VOCs, they are emitted from the building itself, the construction material used, the furniture, the cleaning, and the cooking emission. Next, please. Unlike we might think, indoor pollution is much higher than the outdoor pollution because of two main factors, the exposure time and the concentration level of some of the pollutants, such as VOCs, for instance. So these pollutants are known to have a short-term comfort effect, an impact on the performance and productivity, and also a long-term health effect that we know and we can call the sick building syndrome. And of course, you all know the symptoms related to that. So here we see on the slide how to design and improve indoor air quality. So three main approaches have to be assessed and considered when we design for a good air quality. We have source control. So we need to make sure to reduce or eliminate any source of pollutant, such as high emitting VOC elements. We need to have a proper ventilation. So we need to have a well-designed and operational HVAC system with, of course, a maintenance protocol on the air tightness and filter efficiency. And also air cleaning, which also Marcus discussed. So filtering the air is very important, using air cleaning technology, active building elements, capturing the VOC from the environment, and very also simple measures like air purifying plants, for example. Next, please. So how to choose the right products? With today rising awareness, people are starting to have the right choices in terms of product selection, whether at the stage of the building design or also when doing renovation work. So the logo regulation, product certification, and labeling schemes are very important and helpful to help filter the right construction materials. In Saint-Gobain, we have a wide range of low-emitting VOC products. You can see here, for example, the formaldehyde-free insulation material, which is certified Green Guard. You have also gypsum board with active air technology, so helping to capture up to 70% of the formaldehyde in the room, certified Clean Air Gold. And also other building materials such as adhesives and coatings, so complying to Dubai municipality, for example, low emitting product conformity. So we have the right tools and testing in the market. We just have to create awareness so that people make an informed decision on what to choose and have a more stringent control also on the site to verify that the specified material are the one used on the construction stage. Next, please. So how to measure indoor air quality? This is very important. We have developed a wide expertise in Saint-Gobain around the measurement of indoor air quality. So we have a laboratory mainly used to evaluate and monitor our products and latest innovation. For example, we have emission and depollution test. It could be done at the sample product level, but also at the full wall level. We can also measure the impact on indoor air quality at the level of large-scale chamber. We have also been involved in many projects worldwide with the measurement on site. So in this case, air sampling cartridges are collected and then analyzed in the lab. Next, please. There are two types of measurement that can be done when it comes to pollutants. So next, please. We have the standardized approach, so using air sampling cartridges removed from the air and then analyzed in the lab. So this method allows to identify and quantify the pollutants that exist in the air. It's a very reliable approach, but it's expensive and requires also a certain level of expertise. The other approach we can call continuous measurement, where we can measure total VOC, so TVOC, CO2, temperature, relative humidity. These are the usually measured, but also sometimes carbon monoxide or PM. So it can be an indicator of the trend, but does not give accurate values. And for the total VOC, we cannot identify the exact pollutant and their individual concentration in the air. Next, please. So we need to be careful with the continuous approach. A lot of brands and equipments are in the market today. Some of them are very cheap and might not be reliable. Our Saint-Gobain experts wrote an article about that if you are interested, testing several sensors in the market and comparing their results to air sampling cartridges, as you can see in the graph. So you can see that some of them deviate a lot from the curve. So you can access, if you are interested, the full article. It has been published. And it can show you how sensor technology and sensitivity and other parameters are very important. So the key takeaway is to be careful when choosing the measurement equipment and have it calibrated and verified before use. And of course, the best way to go is to couple the two approaches. So have a continuous monitoring with also some air sampling done in parallel. Next, please. So moving on to the second part of the presentation, Saint-Gobain has been very active working alongside World Green Building Council. As Katrina mentioned, we are global sponsor for the Better Places for People, and also we've been part of the Plant a Sensor campaign to give expertise on the sensoring and monitoring tools. One of the World Green Building Council focus is green schools. You can check on their website interesting data showing the impact of the indoor environment on the health, well-being, and learning of students. It's not only indoor air quality, but also acoustics, daylighting, and thermal comfort are evaluated. Next, please. So this initiative has been adopted locally by EGBC, Emirates Green Building Council, and we decided to partner with them on this project called Emirates Coalition for Green Schools. It started with a roundtable last year and the publication of the white paper that you can access on EGBC website. So the objective of this initiative is to bring together the UAE's strongest advocates for green schools, create a national platform for the expansion of green schools, and ensure that every child is learning in a comfortable and healthy environment. Other important question that we want to answer through the study is the current indoor air quality issue that we have in UAE school. What is the relationship between indoor air quality, building design, the impact on health, comfort, and productivity? Also, what are the local policies and how to explore efficient ways for control and maintenance? And what can we do to raise maximum public awareness and knowledge on this topic? Next, please. So some of the key findings from the white paper are shown in this slide. We have around 700 schools in UAE. 70% of the private school in Dubai and Abu Dhabi were built before the Green Building Regulation. So you have Dubai Green Building Regulation and also Istidama. So before it was mandatory, we have 70% of the schools built. We have also limited number of establishments fulfilling the definition of the green schools. Next, please. In terms of local policies, we have for both Dubai and Abu Dhabi under the building regulation of new building requirements, whether for ventilation, which you can see in the first table, but also for indoor air quality pollutant in the second table. So all of them make sure that we have a proper ventilation rate as per ASHRAE standards, air filtering with sufficient efficiency to be installed before occupancy. We have also requirements such as minimum separation distance between the outdoor air intake and exhaust. And also we have indoor air quality pollutant that should not exceed a certain threshold. We have found only 2 studies in the literature for UAE schools. As you can see in the table, in the lowest table, so we have high concentration of pollutants such as CO2, TVOCs, ventilation rates, and particulate matter. So these studies show very high level, and it's the only measurement that we found in the literature. So this is why we decided to start the project of Emirates Green Building Council by collecting more data through a monitoring campaign. Next, please. So how bad can indoor air quality affect the students? A lot of interesting findings are shown in Better Places for People campaign, but also in the literature. The health and performance of students are highly affected by the bad indoor air quality and also other parameters. We have asthma, for example, and respiratory problems, low level of concentration, bad grades, sick dates, nurse visits. So for instance, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, asthma is one of the leading causes of school absenteeism in the US. So having this in mind, we started our project in the UAE with an extensive indoor air quality measurement, and we chose for that a typical old school in Dubai. Next, please. So the campaign was carried out in February, next please, during 4 consecutive days. We have our indoor air quality experts from Paris who came on site to make sure all the measurements are done properly. We measured in 4 different places. So the outdoor, we measured also an empty classroom as reference. We had also 2 classes, 1 kindergarten and 1 elementary. And we've done continuous monitoring for all the classroom, but also air sampling cartridges, active and passive. And it has been done through the day and the night. And also we've taken the occupancy, the breaks, the time where the AC is on, where it's off. So we have all the data available in order to have a very deep analysis of the results later on. Next, please. So in terms of project planning, we are currently analyzing the data for indoor air quality assessment. So the objective, of course, is to identify and quantify the pollutant. We've also done a light and acoustic measurement because it's also very important and it impacts a lot the comfort in the room. So the results of the study will be published in an industry paper available to the public and of course shared with the UAE schools and government stakeholders. It will be shared during the launch event this year. We will keep everyone posted on the date. And we cannot wait, in fact, to share with everybody the interesting conclusion we were able to collect. One of the key actions that we are looking forward to do is raising awareness and creating knowledge around the topic, whether it is the importance of indoor air quality, whether it is to involve and engage key stakeholders in the educational sector, and also how to improve indoor air quality. So what are the basic measures that we need to do, or in some cases maybe do basic or deep retrofitting even to improve the indoor environments. So for everyone who would like to have some more information or be involved at this stage or later on in this project, please contact me or EGBC using the link you can see in the slides. Next, please. So to conclude, I think this crisis, I think after this crisis, we all are more aware of the importance of health and well-being, and it's something we need to focus on, next please, collectively, to build prosperous and sustainable cities. Thank you.
Nada, thank you so much. And Marcus, thank you very much as well. 2 brilliantly interesting presentations, and I think great to really illustrate and give a lot more detail on both the issues we're facing, but also great to see some solutions as well. So now we are moving into the Q&A portion of this webinar. So I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions that we've prepared so we can kick off the conversation, but it's been great to see loads of questions coming in live on the chat box. So please do keep sharing your questions directly with us. We'll pick them up and then we'll also start asking some of your questions to Nada, Marcus, and myself as well. So kicking off with a question both to Nada and Marcus to hear both of your takes on this, please. But both of you highlighted in your presentations that we spend a great deal of our time indoors, particularly these days. And we know that in the Middle East, the climate and the environmental conditions not only affect the air quality, but mean that at particular times of the year, people will be staying inside even more. So I wonder if you would both be able to talk a little bit about some of the factors affecting air quality specifically in the UAE and the wider Middle East region, and the challenges and opportunities it presents when improving air quality, and how do we need to consider these specific geographical factors when we're looking at solutions for buildings in the UAE?
So the main challenge in UAE, because of the harsh environment, we are constantly indoor. So we have our air conditioning system on practically all the time. So we rarely open our windows because when we do, we might be exposed to high humidity and dust particles. So we rely a lot on the ventilation system. So if it's not well designed and maintained, we risk having a box effect. So with many sources of indoor pollutants, it can get stuffy and unhealthy very easily. So what we need to do is pay more attention to the potential source of pollutant and work on limiting or eliminating them. Now, in terms of opportunity, we are lucky to be living in a time where technology is evolving nonstop. We have smart systems. I think Marcus have shown very interesting systems, high filtering, purifying technology, monitoring tool, smart building material designed to make our life easier and healthier. So we need to use them in the right way. How is this considered when developing a new building solution? I think we need to make sure that everything we develop for the building sector has low impact, not only on the environment, but also on the comfort and well-being of the occupants. This is why it's important to have product certification, life cycle assessment, EPDs, HPDs. They are the way to moving forward, and more knowledge and awareness should be given to everything we buy or use indoors. So it should become a natural instinct to constantly question if we are feeling good, and if we are not, what to do to improve it.
Maybe let me add. I think we have to stop guessing and being maybe victim to a placebo effect, and start really measuring. And that's in our hand. We can individually invest in sensors, but there also needs to be the platform provided that shows a building compared to another building, living here versus living there with facts. Because just trusting gut feeling, I also had a gut feeling. That's what, oh, my building, that must be utterly bad. And when I brought my multi-sensor back home, it was better than ever in the office. And I was completely flabbergasted that my feeling was wrong. So we need to base it on facts. But the platform needs to be available. Currently, most of the people I know, they go to an air quality index, which is a formula so complex, and luckily it got adopted by a national air quality index, because where it was originally generated, there was not an environment with desert and flying sands around. It had different weightages. So, I mean, the national air quality index need to be further developed, and I think we have to have a platform here in the Emirates where all of us can upload the sensor data, and we should simply convince our companies and landlords and ourselves to invest in sensors, because then we are talking. Right now we're just feeling, and we may be wrong, as I was wrong.
You're absolutely right. Thank you. I completely agree. And as Nada pointed out, it's not just air quality, is it? It's, although that's the focus of today, we need monitoring for acoustics, for lighting, for thermal comfort. We need the information, don't we?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to pick up a little bit on the current situation, which we're getting a lot of comments on, understandably. And Nada, you said it nicely in your final remark that one of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic has been that it's brought health and well-being into the forefront of everyone's attention. And I know this is a difficult question because so much is still unknown, but I wonder if you would both be able to share your thoughts on maybe some of the early learnings that we can take away from this crisis and how it might impact the way that we design and operate buildings from now on, with a consideration both for air quality and wider health and well-being impacts?
So for me, the key learning is that we must be more proactive in the future. Although humans are resilient and have high adaptation skills, it's important to take the right precautions moving forward. We need to rethink the way we design, as you said, and operate building, because they are key to our health and well-being. For example, for residential buildings, I think the confinement made us all see that our home is a very important space, and it has to have everything we need to sustain us when we can't go out. So, for example, the importance of a balcony or outdoor space, enough daylight, a good kitchen with efficient ventilation, a quiet place where we could work or read. So I'm sure that moving forward, we are going to ask the right questions when we are buying or renting new apartments or offices. And for commercial building with spaces where you have high density of people, like malls, cinemas, public transportation, etc., there are many things to consider when designing them now. So for me, the most important thing is to have the proper ventilation system. So that needs to limit the spread of any contamination with high air renewal capacities and high filtering capacities. I think this is the key thing we need to look at for the design. And of course, monitoring. So we need to have excessive monitoring everywhere.
Good. Maybe to add, it's monitoring and measuring is one thing, but analyzing and acting is another. And ventilation alone will not do the trick. We also need to have active components in there which are capable to eliminate pathogens, viruses, bacteria, especially also mold. Like you rightly said, we have a fully air-conditioned 365 days a year environment, and many people who maybe have sinus infections and so on, they blame it on themselves, on their genetics and so on. But do they blame it on the mold in the air-conditioned ducts and so on? Did they measure? Did they check that? And then if you have that sort, then how do you counteract? So we need to come to with the data, absolutely foundation important, to come to a level where we analyze and we have countermeasures. And these are available. And for a building, it will not only be ventilation, but there are active components, like I mentioned before. Ionization is one, HEPA filters, UV filters, which really bring our environment back to where it is ideal, and that's where we want to be. So the whole circle needs to be taken care of in the built environment. Yeah.
Thanks, Marcus. We've had a lot of questions actually about the ionization process in particular that you talked about. We'll come back to them in a second. We'll do broad and then we'll focus down into the specifics throughout the conversation. But just because we're talking so much about monitoring at the moment, I want to come back, Nada, if we may, to the schools programme that you were talking about. And it's great for me to set this in the context of the fact that Saint-Gobain has been a great support to our plant to sensor work globally. And it's wonderful to see you linking, as you said, with the work that we've published on schools. It's amazing to see this monitoring project going ahead. So I wonder if you could maybe give us a bit of background about why you chose to focus on schools and the UAE and raising awareness around air quality in this focused area in particular.
Okay, thank you, Katrina. So yeah, air monitoring for me is the most important parameter we need to measure because we don't have any other indication on how to evaluate it. As you said, we are very interested and behind Plant a Sensor campaign because it's an amazing platform where all of these indoor air quality data are going to be collected, analyzed, and then shared to the public. And this will make so many people want to be part of it and participate. So I see that this platform will not only, not only school will be interested in this, but residential, malls, a lot of spaces. And in fact, having them on this platform, it's going to feel safe. So we are going to feel safe, for example, putting our children in a school where we know how is the indoor air quality and it has been treated well. it's safe to go to a mall where we know that the right measures are being controlled and taken care of. So this is why this platform is really very important, and I hope also we can widen this platform and create more indicators such as temperature, also acoustics and daylight, as we said. The reason why we decided to work on school is because first, kids are the most vulnerable to bad indoor environments, and it's important to help create for them better educational environment for them to grow. And second, because we have the right platform, so World Green Building Council and EGBC, they have adopted this project, and they made a big effort in driving it and putting all key stakeholders around one table, which is not something easy to do. And third, because we have the internal expertise and knowledge about how to drive and support this project, whether for the monitoring, the analysis, and later on providing the right recommendation on how to improve the indoor environment with solutions, with so many advice to improve it.
Thanks, Nada. And I'm going to pick up on what you just said right at the end there about taking this data and turning it into solutions. And Marcus, I'm going to hand this over to you, if I may, because we're getting a lot of questions coming in saying that what are some of these corrective possible actions? And you highlighted a few great technology options in your presentation, but if I may, I'll come to you with two questions. Firstly, for people who are occupants perhaps in their homes right now. So could you maybe share some actions that the individual can do in their home firstly? And then I'll open it up to both of you and we can talk about developers and property owners on a larger scale. So Marcus, first of all, occupants and citizens.
Look, if I would be in retail, I would also tell people buy it individually, take care of yourself and so on. But you will end up and not only having a TV and a stereo in your living room, but 6 other devices, and ultimately it's a waste of money. I believe that the building itself has the building standards, and we must build in countermeasures where it is commercially much more sensible and not to deload from the construction industry or from the developers this responsibility to the individual occupants. I say, if I were in retail, I would say go and buy your 5-6 devices, then you're safe. But I think that's not economical, and it should be something that is online connected and supervised. So I'm not really for the individual solutions, although I also have an air cleaner, a HEPA filter in my living room, but still, that can be centralized. It will be much more economical. So the owner association of buildings or the building management of corporations should must really open this new chapter and make their call, make their call on this active devices, and the connection to a platform, to the building automation system, to the building management system is important, because even if you install it, you always need to monitor the effectiveness of your countermeasures. So it's a own separate cycle. Technologies, various technologies are available. The important is I would go for centralized application, and online monitoring of the effectiveness of such devices. We could have a separate webinar on the individual technologies, how they function in detail, and that's not the problem of the world, not to know how it works. The real problem of us is that we don't get in action mode, and we don't convince, and there is where COVID is now helping us. Imagine this would be a much more airborne virus. Maybe this is still a warning for us because it is not that airborne, right? What then? We wouldn't even walk anywhere other than our own room anymore, right? I mean, we would be so afraid. So we have time, and in this time now we need to act and build in components that can give us assurance that the pathogens are knocked out.
Thank you. I think that's a great headline to take away, that you're calling for centralized action. You're absolutely right. We could have an entire other webinar about individuals, but just to push you a little bit more, if we're talking about these centralized interventions, so we're talking about building owners, property developers, corporations, what can people do firstly when they're designing buildings, and what should we do for buildings that are already operational? What can we do as a retrofit measure?
It's really easy. I showed on one slide, and the slides will be available for everyone who has joined. You can basically retrofit it into the ducting of every floor in a residential building. So these ions can't be alive for more, I think, than travel time like 60 seconds in a duct. Then basically it disappeared. It has done its purpose. So it can't be just in one place in a high riser, but it will probably be in every floor, inserted in the ducting or in a certain key elements. But the investment must come from the owner association or the developer or the contractor who I mean, design. Look, no one of us lives now in a building that is just presently designed, and we are all living. So it goes into a retrofit scenario. We look at the situation, we can tell, and lots of other companies can tell where to insert what devices, and then we roll. When we integrate it in a management platform, and we know that it functions. That all can be done as we speak. It's just to kick somebody on and say, we want this in our building. And there are 6 to 8 let's say owners representatives. We could also speak to RIRA here in Dubai, for example. This needs to get going, and it's not the technological, does it work? It does. The point is the humans don't work because we don't act.
Thanks, Marcus. So we've got an anthropological human problem, but also technological solutions. Thank you for going through that. And to highlight what Marcus said, the slides will be available afterwards. EGBC will help us distribute those, and you can find out more information on some of the solutions Marcus mentioned through that. But if I may, I'm going to move us away from HVAC, where we could quite easily talk for the remainder of the session, and transition over to materials. And I've got a question specifically for Nada, if I may, because Saint-Gobain, of course, are materials specialists. You develop and supply materials for the construction industry and have seen, I'm sure, huge changes in trend and pattern around the world. But I'm particularly interested to know if you've recognized any transitions in trends in the UAE about how we can source materials that create healthier indoor environments. And maybe could you talk a little bit about that, and then we can pick up the cost question as well, which keeps coming up. Firstly, is there a trend? And secondly, can we do it without a higher cost?
Okay, so definitely we can do it. I mean, today there are so many technologies that can develop low emitting product, but also active products. So cleaning the air, so removing VOCs or formaldehyde from the air. So we have both technology, and they are available in the market. We'll discuss the cost later, but in the UAE, I think there's definitely more awareness about this topic. And the local regulation and labeling schemes are helping a lot shape the future of the construction sector. I've shown in one of the slides. So we have worldwide labeling schemes such as LEED, very well implemented here, but also well standard today that has more focus on health and well-being. So we definitely have the right regulation pushing all the construction material manufacturer to go into this direction and to provide material that have low emissions, so low VOCs. In terms of cost, you have to always keep in mind the productivity and efficiency that you create, with a good environment. More importantly, when it impacts our health. There are many studies out there showing there's a clear synergy between well-performing building and well-performing occupants. One of them is our headquarters, for example, in North America. So we have done a whole retrofitting of the building, not only for indoor air quality, but other types of retrofitting. And we've seen a huge impact on the occupants' well-being. They feel more healthy. The return on investment is very interesting. We have a set of KPIs that clearly show that you have invested correctly into long-term improvements, because they are long-term. They can live throughout the life cycle of the building. And so that will quickly pay off. So we just need to take the right decision and maybe invest more in the beginning, but it's definitely a very interesting return on investment.
Thanks, Nada. And I'd like to link this back a little bit to the coronavirus pandemic again, if I may, because we're getting some questions in asking specifically about things like air change per hour. How do you think the coronavirus impact is going to affect that kind of guidance? Do you think that is going to be something, for example, that we're going to need to have higher recommended air changes per hour? And is that going to impact the cost effectiveness at all if we have to now create even healthier environments?
Look, we figured out that we have no countermeasures. And that's why we say maximum air changes per hour, right? But how long can we sustain this if we have a 45-degree summer and cooling will just be astronomically expensive? So there is a smarter way to do it. And the smarter way is to simply neutralize what is in the air, including, I mean, imagine you do maximum amount of air changes and you have a sandstorm. What then? Then you have maximum of sand on your desk indoors, and we don't want to be there. So we need to have a balance between technology and yeah, just a simple solution like let's maximize air changes. Yeah. So there are critical labs around the world, and no one will dispute there are scientists who deal with the most dangerous viruses around the world in some labs, right? Still, they don't manage it through outside air changes. They neutralize what's in the air, and of course they are protected and then follow the highest standards. But these technologies, to a certain degree, we have to implement in our buildings and offices for the good feeling and for the sake of the occupants. We need to make it visible for everyone. So if I and you, we go back to office, I want to see a KPI on my office dashboard, preferably on my app, my office app, with which I booked my desk, that ABCD KPIs are in check. And there are no VOCs, there are no particles in the air, and everything is in green. Then I know my company did a great job to make me perform at my best. I think we all learned this lesson now. Technologically, not an issue, but I just speak from our own requirements. The company has a real estate department, and we say to them, get me real estate, make sure there is a temperature control, humidity control, and maybe some dust control. So that's it. They delivered exactly as specified. Now we need to hike that specification up and tell them that we want a bit more. It's now the time. We have realized it. And maybe it's still a warning, right? As I said, it's not airborne.
Yeah, I agree with Marcus that it should be a compromise, you know, between the ventilation system, but also the air cleaning and neutralization that will happen, you know, indoor. Because also we cannot keep the ventilation operational all the time. It's very hard to, you know, have a maximum air renewal coming, because it will also impact the energy. So we have also to think about other parameters involved in this. So I agree that we should, you know, have an optimum between both ventilation and air cleaning technologies. If you want, there's also on REVA website a guideline that was developed specifically for COVID-19. So you can check very interesting guidelines showing building services, advice and recommendation, and a lot of measures that you know, can help limit the contamination.
Now let me also branch out again to the city, because this is where most of us actually think, what can we do? The sandstorm, the wind, yeah, we need power, and that's just inevitable. But we can manage the way around the things. And construction site produce an enormous amount of fine dust. Why do we let this happen when the wind direction is unfavorable? It is such a simple thing to do, which doesn't even require multiple millions of dollars. It just will delay certain work till the wind direction is favorable for us occupants. So it is a scheduling task between earthwork and wind direction, which currently is not done. Right? But it's possible, and very easy possible. It will just annoy a few of construction managers. Say, I'm not getting onto my schedule. Yeah, fine. But if you shoot a bullet in the air and it lands a kilometer away in somebody's neck, you are a murderer if they find you, right? But if you have a dump truck and dump 2.5 micron particles and 200 people end up in hospital, you have done nothing wrong, because action and reaction is not correlated. I think we have the means with the sensors and the analytics. And it's time that we also structure the generation of pollutants outside in the city. That requires a city management platform. We have parts of it already, but there is a long way, and there's a lot more technology it can do for us. Yeah.
Thank you both. I really like this theme that's coming out in the discussion here of both having these quite high-tech smart solutions, but also these simple interventions that, as you say, should be common sense, Markus. And let's just add a little bit of technicality, if we may, because we've mentioned loads of KPIs, we've mentioned measurables in the last couple of minutes, we've talked VOCs, particulate matter, temperature, humidity, but for people who are going to leave this webinar and maybe think a little bit more about monitoring and data collection and how we can start to be more equipped with information, what are the most important parameters or contaminants that people should be measuring specifically in indoor environments? Have we said them all already?
Nada?
Yes, you said most of them, Katrina. So TVOCs is an important parameter to measure, just to know the trend, as I said in my slides. But it's very important to know what are the pollutants that are involved in the VOC. So this is why it's very interesting also to couple. It's not, okay, continuous measuring is very interesting. You can put it out there. You can, notice the trend. But in order to know what are the exact pollutants that you have inside of your space, you have to do air sampling cartridges. So you have to take, have a tool, a sample where you draw air and you go back to the lab and analyze it. I think these are very important. You have to couple both because you need to know what inside of your VOC. It could be things that cannot be captured by continuous monitoring, such as sometimes formaldehyde. Sometimes some sizes of particulate matter cannot be captured, with very low microns. So this is why it's very important to have, something very easy to monitor and to keep in our space, but also do very expert and specialized monitoring. But the CO2 is very important also. It can show you the air renewal rate. So the CO2 is correlated to the ventilation. So if you have high CO2 level, you don't have enough ventilation. So total VOCs, CO2, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, these are the most important ones.
Yeah, let me add to CO2. I was initially intrigued and tried to increase the oxygen content in the environmental air in an office, right? Because there are studies which show that you have a much less fatigue and a higher productivity and an elevated oxygen environment. Yeah? Talking not 21.7, but maybe 25 to 30% of oxygen. And there are corporations that have experimented with that, which works. But it is not sustainable because it costs too much to enrich the oxygen in a built environment, and the equal effect on the human in terms of productivity and less fatigue is if you reduce the CO2 content. So basically, both works almost the same way. Only reducing the CO2 content is a much cheaper measure compared to the enrichment of the oxygen content in environmental air. So coming back, CO2 levels in built environments have a huge impact on human productivity. We are feeling it at, I would say, 1,000 to 2,200 ppm. We can start to feel stuffy, but the effect is already there. And there are technologies. It's pretty funny. It's not only to circle the air and to have air turns, but there are carbon capture technologies. And they are currently used in steel plants, they are used in power plants, and you wouldn't believe even, soda pop companies, they are capturing CO2 from exhausts of power generators and use that CO2 for the bubbly drinks, right? So that's possible. So carbon capture is something I believe it will earlier or later also come into office or residential buildings, again, as a centralized equipment to regulate CO2 content. But me personally, I think CO2 has the highest effect. Although there are much more dangerous things because simply we get tired. So VOCs and other organic compound or pathogens are much more dangerous. Yeah? The effects of CO2 will never be that deadly.
Thank you both so much. And we have a lot more questions still in the chat box. There's lots on my list that I haven't got to, but I think the discussion that we've had has been incredibly informative and definitely demonstrated the incredible expertise of both Nada and Markus. So thank you both very much. Really, really interesting. And I think we've given a great balance of information, but also solutions. So thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure for me to moderate this discussion and to be able to present to you today. So thank you very much for having me, EmirateGBC, and I will hand back over to Lindsay now to close.
All right. Lindsay and Catriona, I don't mind if you put my email address in the chat. So if people have questions, they can contact me directly. And maybe some of them are still in the chat. Of course, there's a lot to talk about. Of course, there are technological things that maybe still want to be explored. But my last message would be to any decision makers or government representatives. There is a very big worry of shaming or bringing bad things to light. I believe it is right now important to show the statuses as accurate as we find it, but also ask the public to contribute observations, because with the observations and the data, we can start to define the protocol for countermeasures. Yeah? And it will be very interesting things. It's really time to promote such a platform, invest in it, and I hope the Energy Green Building Council and the Emirates Green Building Council can also have a strong role in this. Yeah, I believe we will all be front runners in having such a system. Thank you.
Thanks, Markus. I'm not sure if we've lost Lindsay.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Nada, any final words?
So maybe a last takeaway. I think we all need to cultivate, healthier habits and pass along the message whenever we can. Teach each other, spread knowledge, and I'm super excited about, whether plant a sensor campaign or our school study, which will encourage other establishments to start taking the right measures. So also, please, Katrina, if you can share my email address in case anybody wants to connect and discuss more things in details. And I was very happy to take part of this webinar, and I thank you and EGBC for hosting it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to co-host. Yeah,
thank you.
Take care, everyone. Stay healthy.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.